So guys, like I said again, welcome back to another Michael's Classroom class. And if you're new here, then welcome. We're so glad to have you. My name is Emma Panuski. I'm a content creator here at Plaid. And today we're going to be making this really, really cute little, using our FolkArt sign shop, decorative tray, utensil holder, whatever you want to call it. But I'm super excited to show you guys some tips and tricks with our new sign shop product. And just make this super cute craft with you guys today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started, and I'll go over all of the supplies that you'll need to get started. So of course, you're going to need our awesome FolkArt sign shop supplies. So if you have never heard of FolkArt sign shop, it is a new product that we released here at Plaid into Michael's just a few weeks ago, about a month ago. So if you don't have it in your local Michael's yet, it should be there about any day in the next few weeks. So keep a lookout for that. So we have, along with the line, a really awesome stencil paste. So they come in this really big basics pack. And the great thing about the stencil paste is it's really great to mix with. It's super, super rich and creamy. So it really makes using these mesh stencils foolproof. So we have this awesome basics pack. So if you can't find the color you're looking for in one of the smaller packs, this is a really great alternative because it's great for mixing. You can make any colors you want. And then we also have these smaller packs, and we've kind of done all the work for you with these guys. We've picked a beautiful palette, so all you have to do is grab your surface, grab your stencil paste pack, and you are ready to craft, and it'll always look beautiful. Also, we have some really great tools to work with your mesh stencils and your stencil paste. We have the silicone spreader here. We also have these little plastic spreaders, and they come in a variety pack of a bunch of different sizes with a kind of an edged side and a flat side. So whatever works best for you, we have it for you. And then we also have, let me grab it. We also have this brush pack, which makes it's really easy to use on like 3D surfaces, which our mesh stencils fit around great. So this is a really great thing for 3D surfaces. And then of course, what would sign shop be without our mesh stencils? So we have dozens of different sized mesh stencils for you to use. And of course, today I'm going to give you guys some tips and tricks on how to layer your mesh stencils with our FolkArt sign shop. So we have these really awesome backgrounds, and I'll show you guys what comes in the backgrounds pack. So this really cute buffalo kind of check plaid style, and it comes in these two different patterns. I love these, and that's of course what we're going to be using today. And we also have this pack. We're going to be using this Eat stencil, which is adorable for all of your dinner party decorations, for all your outside parties. This will be a really great stencil to use for Easter or any really holiday, and you could just switch it up and use some spring colors. And then it also comes with this. I hope you guys can see that okay. Here, I'll flip it to the overhead. It says Best in Town Bakery, fresh out of the oven and hot brewed coffee. So that's just a really super cute stencil to put in your kitchen, really to put wherever. And I just want to remind you guys too, Lindsay is in the Q&A section looking at all your questions and relaying them over to me. So if you have any comments, any questions throughout the live stream, just make sure to list them down below and Lindsay can answer them herself or relay them over to me. And I don't know if I mentioned this before too, but like always, we want to give a huge thank you to Michael's for allowing us to do this class with you guys today. So what we're working with specifically today is this backgrounds pack and those phrases that I showed you, the Eat and the hot brewed coffee. And then we're working with this classic blues stencil paste pack. Here, I'll show you guys what we're making again today. This adorable little holder. So first of all, we're going to start by staining our holder here. This is just a raw wood surface, and we're actually going to use some just regular FolkArt acrylic paint to make a stain. And this is great because it'll be a non-toxic way to stain any kind of raw wood surface. And I've showed you guys a couple of stains before with our FolkArt acrylic paint, and I've only showed you them in brown. But I just want to reiterate that you can do this with any kind of paint color. And you can do like a cerulean or like a hot pink. That would be super cute for Easter and spring. And the possibilities are really just endless. So I just wanted to point that out because I don't think I ever had before. Okay, so you could, and another thing too, I'm going to base coat this white part with just some regular FolkArt acrylic paint. But the great thing about our stencil paste is that you could also use our stencil paste to base coat. But I'm just going to use the FolkArt acrylic paint today just to show you how well our FolkArt acrylic works with our sign shop line. Okay, so these three beautiful brown colors are available at Michael's in our FolkArt line. And I just kind of wanted to go over like the difference between them and why I'm choosing the color that I want to choose. So over on the left here, we have coffee bean, which is kind of a warm medium brown. And then the center, we have real brown, which is kind of a darker color. And then we have burnt umber. And the difference between this real brown and this burnt umber, the real brown is kind of a warmer tone. So that means it has more red in it. And then our burnt umber is a cooler tone and it has kind of more blue tones in there to make it cooler. And I'm going to choose this burnt umber because when we add our water to our paint, it's going to, you know, lessen the opacity, obviously. And it's going to not be as, like I said, it's not going to be as opaque on our surface. So keeping that in mind, I usually go for darker brown colors just to keep that really strong brown color on my surface. And I just prefer a cooler tone. So it's just really up to you. You can either choose this cooler tone with burnt umber or this warmer tone with real brown. Or if you wanted to go for kind of like a faded stain, you could go for this really warm coffee bean color. So I just wanted to point that out when you're choosing your stain color. So
Emma, you can, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
You can stencil directly on the raw wood, correct? You don't have to do a stain if you don't want to.
Absolutely. We just did this cute little faux stain on here just because we thought it was a little bit more finished looking, but you could absolutely stencil right on this raw wood. Great question.
Because we have a question about, you know, do we have to put anything underneath the stencil paste? And I think they're talking about base coating or staining. You can just do it directly on the wood if you want to.
Absolutely. And the great thing about our stencil paste is that it's multi-surface. So it works well on canvas, fabric, wood, metal, terracotta, ceramic, anything you can think of. Okay, so let's get our burnt umber and we're going to squeeze a little bit out onto just this ceramic plate we have. And I just want to mention this to you guys, whenever you're making a paint stain, you have to be mindful of what you're going to put your paint and your water on, because of course, if you're using like a paper plate or something that's absorbent, it's going to want to pull in all that water into your palette. So that's why I'm choosing a non-porous palette, like a ceramic plate or like a styrofoam plate or a piece of palette paper. That's not going to draw in all that water. So now that we have our paint onto our palette, I just have some regular tap water here, and we're just going to pour a little bit onto our palette. And I just really like to, you know, kind of work slowly when I'm making my stain and just keep an eye on the consistency because you don't want too much or too little of one certain thing. And to mix this together, I'm just kind of kneading it with my brush. I'm not like mixing it around because we want our brush to stay nice.
And Emma, is this the stain color you used on the finished product?
I'm pretty sure. If not, this one looks a little bit warmer. I may have used the real brown on that one. I think I used real brown, but today we're switching it up with burnt umber. Okay, we're just kneading that. And all I mean by kneading is we're just kind of mixing it by pressing down. We're not mixing it by going in a circular motion. And we're pulling some of that goodness back. Oops. Okay, I'm happy with that. We're kind of looking for the consistency of like a little bit thicker than whole milk. And maybe we'll even add just a touch more water. Just a splash. And that's what I said in the beginning. You just want to keep working with it and just really see if it's looking good enough. Oops, that's okay. Okay, so now we're just going to apply our stain onto our wood surface, just how we would with any other acrylic paint. We're just going to brush it on. And Dylan, if you wouldn't mind, just grab me some paper towels. I always forget that every time I do a stain. I go over and over in my head everything I need for the class, and I never remember paper towels. It's like one of those crafting supplies that you don't really think to include, like a pencil or a pair of scissors.
Franny says that this is one of her favorite tips from Plaid, mixing your own custom stain.
Awesome. I'm so glad. And the great thing about this too, like I said in the beginning, like a lot of stains you'll use, you have to work in a well-ventilated area or outside or with a mask to protect yourself. But the great thing about this technique is that it is totally non-toxic. You have a little bit more working time with it. It's great. Thank you, Dylan. You're the best. Okay, so now we're just going to use just a regular paper towel. You can use a cloth. You just want to make sure it's dry, and then just kind of wipe some of that excess off. It doesn't matter what kind of motion you go in. You can go back and forth in a circular motion. But I think today we're going to go back and forth because I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's pulling some of the wood from the actual surface. And so we want to just keep and you could, hit this with some sandpaper, some really fine sandpaper. But we want our surface to stay as smooth as possible. So we're just going to go back and forth, keeping with the grain of the wood. Okay. And so what we would want to do is we would want to go along all of the sides of our surface. And if you wanted to be a little bit cleaner than me, you could just use some regular stencil tape or some painter's tape and tape along the edges so that your inside stays that pretty raw wood color. Or if you wanted to, of course, you could stain the whole entire thing. And another thing I want to point out too, if you want your stain to be a little bit more opaque, you can always, hit it again with your stain. Just apply a second coat or a third coat until you get the opacity that you like.
It's looking really pretty already.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, it's just super, super simple. Anybody can do this. Okay. Grab our paper towel again. Get some of that excess off. And you can leave it on too, but I feel like the wiping it off just kind of adds to that, it makes it look more of a stain. Okay, just to save a little bit of time, I think I'm going to leave it there, but ideally I would just go around to all the sides and stain this whole thing. Okay, and I'm just going to rinse my brush off. You might be wondering why I have such a huge water basin today. That's so that we can clean our stencils, which we'll get to a little bit later. Okay, so take this out of the way. Now I'm just going to hit this with a blow dryer just because we want this to be pretty dry before we move on to our next step. Oh my goodness, just move the table. There we go. Okay, So the reason that we dried that just then, you would just let it dry naturally, but we of course use the hair dryer today so that things could move a little bit quicker for you all, so that we didn't have to just wait. But the reason that we let this dry is because we are going to introduce it to some white paint. And if we didn't let it dry, then this would turn into a really like pretty beige color, which is okay if you want that, but we are wanting that really stark white look. So that's why we dried that. If we didn't dry it, it would not be white. It would pick up the brown color. And so Dylan is grabbing me some sandpaper because I just want to mention something. You really want your surface to be as flat as possible. And we're really getting, thank you, Dylan. You're the best. So we're just sanding this off a little bit. Like I said, we want it to be as smooth as possible because when you introduce that water to your wood, it's going to pull out the fibers of the wood and it's just going to create an irregular texture. We want it to be as smooth as possible and really help those mesh stencils. The mesh stencils are going to be super forgiving on us, but we just want it to be as smooth as we can get it. And this is just some really fine grit sandpaper. And if you'll notice too, as we sand it, it kind of gives it that like distressed farmhouse feel to it. And I kind of like the way that looks.
Emma, while you're sanding, Myra has a question.
Okay.
If you were sanding a large piece of furniture, would there be an advantage to using traditional wood stain as opposed to the acrylic paint?
As long as you seal it, I don't think so. You could totally use like buy a bigger bottle of FolkArt acrylic and water it down. Probably wouldn't even need a bigger bottle. And then as long as you seal it, it would work really well for that. And we have a really great like wax sealer in our FolkArt home decor chalk paint that would work really great for a large piece of furniture. Okay, now I just have a damp towel here just to kind of wipe out some of that dust. You see that? You want to do that anytime you stain something, just because of course when you're sanding it, you're pulling out some of the paint and some of the wood. So you just want to get it just a damp cloth to get some of that extra kind of dusty, sandy. Okay, so now I'm going to get my stencil tape, and you can use painter's tape, masking tape, whatever you have around, and we're going to tape off our tray. You see this? We're going to make it look like that so that we get those really sharp edges when we put our white there. And a good tip to have, you guys, whenever you're taping something off and you want your stencil to be even in the center, just pull out your stencil and kind of have it there for reference so that you allow yourself enough room. And this tape is like a little bit see-through so that I can really see how much I'm taping off, which is really nice. And we just want our top and bottom to be pretty even. And I'm going to paint a little bit more of this surface than I did on that one. And just one thing to note, you just want your tape to be really secure on there so we get some really clean and crisp lines. And we're just eyeballing it, you guys. If you really want to, you can use a ruler just to make sure that everything is really even, but I always eyeball it. And it always turns out pretty good. Okay, so now we're gonna break out our FolkArt wicker white. And now we don't really have to worry about what our palette is. So I'm just using a regular paper plate. And we're gonna apply some to our palette. And we're just using just a regular 1-inch flat brush. Oops, and I would just want to secure my tape just a little bit more. to get some really crisp lines.
This is another place where you could choose your own color palette. So if you wanted to do a different color other than white, there's lots of folk art acrylics to choose from.
Absolutely, Lindsay, great point. The best thing about these classes, you guys, is we kind of show you the tips and tricks and maybe some inspiration on maybe some ideas you've never thought of before, but then the rest is up to you. You can choose whatever paint colors you want, whatever surface you want. And now that you guys have those tips and tricks, the possibilities are endless.
And we encourage you guys to take pictures of what you make and then go online and share them using the hashtag #MakeItWithMichaels and also the hashtag #PlaidCrafts. We follow those hashtags and we can see what you guys post, and we love seeing what you make.
Absolutely. We get inspired by all of you.
We do.
Okay, and a little like kind of cheater trick that I'm going to give you guys. Whenever I'm about to like put a pattern on top of something, I'm not going to really worry about how opaque my color is, because we're just going to put another pattern on top of it, and it's going to look so busy that you won't notice if your color isn't super opaque. So it is very opaque, don't get me wrong, and that's why I love folk art paint so much. But you can obviously give this another coat, but I'm not really too worried about it because we're putting a pattern on top of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm just going to step off for one more second while I hit this with a blow dryer again. But first, we're going to rinse our brush, and then I'm going to remove this tape. Okay, now I'm going to hit this with the blow dryer. Okay, and a neat little tip I like to give, if you're ever unsure if something is dry or not, I just like to feel it to the touch, and if it's a little bit cool, that usually means it still has some drying to do, because what the coolness indicates is that your water is still evaporating from your paint, and that means it's a little bit wet. So that's just something kind of fun to know.
And we do have a couple of questions before you move on. Pamela would like to know, were you using a regular blow dryer?
Yes, it's just a regular hair blow dryer, and I like to toggle between the warm and the cool just to kind of keep it moving.
Okay, and one more question. Sean would like to know if you used the regular folk art acrylic or the multi-surface wicker white.
I just use the regular acrylic, and that's because this wood is a porous surface. If I were painting on something like glass or metal, then I would go for the multi-surface because that works really well for non-porous surfaces like that. Great questions. But you could totally use multi-surface on this. And another thing to point out, multi-surface is going to give you a satin finish. And the regular folk art acrylic is going to give you this really pretty matte finish. So just whatever you prefer, really. Okay, so break out our background stencils. And this is where I get to show you the beauty of these sign shop stencils. So you can either choose whichever plaid pattern you prefer. This is the one that we showed in the event listing picture, so we'll use that today. And I'm going to just kind of note where our stencil starts and stops. So that it's easy to trim. So we're going to follow this. I just always like to follow a straight line so that when I cut it out, especially when I'm using a pattern, so that way when I cut it out, it'll be really straight on my surface. But if you didn't have any straight lines in your pattern, just use a ruler and a pencil and just mark one, and that's just a really great way to keep your project looking clean. I lost my place. There we go. Okay, and these are adhesive stencils. They have a low-tack adhesive on them, so it makes it really easy to keep your project secure. And we're just kind of, and you can see through the mesh, see that? So we're just kind of finding the corner of our stencil and the corner of our white. And then we're going to lay it flat.
These stencils are so great.
I know, they really are amazing. They're like one of my favorite stencils we've ever come out with. They're so easy to use and they really are like foolproof. And see how there's some of our stained paint coming through? We're just going to use our stencil tape to cover that. And if you feel like you're a pro and you're not going to get it on that area, then you can skip the stencil tape. But sometimes I get a little clumsy with my crafting.
Well, for people like me who are new to stenciling, as much as I love it, yes, I would definitely need the tape.
Yes. There isn't any shame in taping your projects, you guys. Okay, so we have this really pretty classic blues palette. Look at all these pretty blues it comes with. We're going to use in this project the same colors we used in our event listing picture. So for that lighter blue, we used this cerulean. And then for that really darker blue, we used navy. And we used cerulean for the background. So we'll place our navy aside and use the cerulean. And we're going to bring back our paper plate. And squeeze some onto our palette. And you don't need a whole lot, you guys. The great thing about this stencil paste is a little goes a really long way. So one last time, we're just going to really make sure that our stencil is secure on our surface. And you can choose any tool that works best for you. I'm going to use this little plastic squeegee tool.
And Emma, can you tell us the difference between the regular plaid paint and the stencil paste?
Absolutely. So the regular plaid paint, like our FolkArt paint or our FolkArt multi-surface paint, it's really rich and creamy and it's really opaque. But the difference between that and our stencil paste is that our stencil paste is a lot thicker than our regular FolkArt acrylic. And so it's just really going to help you to, not get any bleeding in your mesh stencil. It's really going to stay in place and create that pattern that you're wanting to achieve. Okay. So all we're going to do is we're going to start at the top and we're going to drag down. And you'll know that your stencil is filled in because you can just totally see it in your stencil. Those blank spaces become opaque with your paint.
And the colors are so vibrant. I just love them.
Yes, me too. This is a lot like silk screens. If you ever got into textile crafts, it's a lot like that. And of course, if you're new here, I feel like we've talked about this all the time, but we haven't talked about it in this class yet. The difference between a mesh stencil and just a regular paper stencil or mailbox stencil, or really any stencil that's not mesh, is that there are no breaks in your stencil. You could never get this this kind of pattern with all of that detail without having breaks in it. You see this, how detailed it is? That's the beauty of these mesh stencils, that you get that really fine detail. You're not having to connect all those breaks yourself. It's just really a game changer.
Yeah, it looks very professional when it's completed.
It really does. I mean, you could make a bunch of these and sell them. That's just how professional these stencils make your projects look. And they're reusable, so you can use these dozens and dozens of times and make as many projects as you want to with just one stencil pack. And the paste goes a long way too. I mean, look how much I squeezed out in the beginning and we're already halfway done. Okay, we're going to squeeze a little bit more onto our palette.
And Allie has a question. Is she's trying to figure out if it's stencil paste or stencil paint, and you're saying stencil paste.
Yes, it is stencil paste. Excuse me if I've been saying paint. I'm used to saying paint, but this is stencil paste. So if you're looking for this, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it is paint, but it's so thick that it's called a paste.
Yes, exactly. And if you're looking for this stencil paste on michaels.com or in store, just search for or ask for FolkArt Sign Shop stencil paste.
And I love these squeegees too, because they make it easy to get in those little tiny areas. Like you're coming to the edge right now and you're not having any problems going off the stencil.
Yes, absolutely. They are super duper easy to work with. Just want to get in there, make sure you get all those nooks and crannies, and that's like Lindsay was saying, that's the beauty about this tool. Okay, now for the big reveal, you guys.
This is my favorite part.
So we're going to take this tape off. We'll just take the stencil with it. Look how beautiful that is.
So cool.
Okay, so now we are going to wash this in our water basin. And you can use soap and water, or you can just use some really clean water. And we're just kind of massaging that stencil. And one thing to note, you just want to do this immediately right after you're done with your stenciling, because you don't want all that paste to dry in the nooks and crannies of your stencil, because you don't want, there to be any barriers in that mesh.
And you're just using regular plain water to clean it, correct?
Yes, just regular plain water.
Myra has a question.
Okay.
If she has a specific acrylic paint color that she already has, is there a way to thicken it so that it would work with the stencil?
So you could use that acrylic paint color and use it on here. Our mesh stencils are really forgiving. Our stencil paste was formulated to specifically work with our mesh stencils. So they work the best, but you could use just regular FolkArt acrylic paint, or you can buy this big basics pack and try to mix it yourself to achieve that color, because it'll be a lot easier for you. Okay, so we're just kind of peeling it up, just kind of looking. We want to just make sure that there's no paint in our mesh. And now we're going to leave it to dry. But for the purpose of this class today, I'm going to dry it a little bit with some paper towels here, and maybe even hit it with a blow dryer. want to get some of that excess off. And when you're done, you guys, it's going to still be just as adhesive as the first time you used it. So let me use a blow dryer on this really quick. Okay, and so, oh, you know what? I'm gonna hit my surface with my blow dryer as well, just real quick. Okay, nice and dry. So now we're just gonna line up our pattern here again. Okay, and we're gonna get our stencil tape again and just tape off all the areas that we don't want our blue paint to fall. And if you can see, I overlapped my stencil, and so we don't want to go over that again and lose that detail. So we're going to tape that as well. And you guys, were just to remind everyone, we're reusing the same stencil that we just used. We're taping off right where that brown starts to show. And that should be good. Now we always want to secure that our stencil and our tape are really nice and on there. And now we didn't even wash our squeegee. We're just going to apply more paint to it. It might make me a lazy crafter, but any craft I can do without having to wash paintbrushes after is an amazing craft to me.
Amen, sister.
See how much paste collects on your squeegee too? You want to make sure you get all that goodness.
And the squeegees come in a lot of different sizes. So if you have a much smaller stencil, there are smaller squeegees that you can use to get those details too.
Absolutely, and I'll show you guys what it looks like after I'm done peeling this guy off. Just apply a drop more of this paint just to finish it off. Not much at all. And I just kind of like to run my squeegee through it, and that really helps me to pick up my paint. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And we do have a couple more questions.
Okay.
Olivia would like to know about how many times can you reuse the stencil?
So, you know, we haven't found the limit yet. We've used our stencils dozens and dozens of times, and they still work just like they did in the beginning. Just one thing that you really, really want to make sure to do is to wash your stencil as soon as you're done using it. You don't want any of the paste to dry before you peel your paint up. Before you peel your stencil up and before you place it under running water or in some still water like I have here, because you will get some barriers in your stencil from the paint. and you won't be able to reuse it and get the same detail as before.
So take good care of your tools.
Yes, just like with any other craft.
And John would like to know, can we use the brushes from this line instead of the squeegee?
Absolutely, you can use whatever tool you want. It's really up to you. We have a lot of different tools, so you really just have to try them and see which one works best for you.
And Mary Lou would like to know, could chalk paint be used with these stencils?
You know, I would be a little bit wary of using chalk paint just because, just like in the name, we have particles in it that make it really chalky and really matte. And so it is, I would say you can test it on a little stencil and see how it works for you. It's not going to block it. You can always wash it out. But before you do it on your regular project, I would test it on a scrap piece of wood or something first. We haven't used chalk paint with it. Okay, so now I'm going to blow dry this really quick, and then we're going to layer our eat on top of it, and then we'll be done, you guys. Okay, we're good to go. So now the last step of this project, we're going to grab our eat stencil. I can find it. And I like to just trim my stencil down when it's bigger than I need it to be. It's just helpful for me. You can obviously keep your stencil this size, keep it intact, but I just like to trim it down, make it a little bit easier on myself.
This would be a really cute snack container for after school snacks.
Yes, that is a great idea, Lindsay. I love that idea. Okay, so again, we're just gonna eyeball it, see if it's where we want it. That looks good to me. What do you guys think?
Looks great.
Okay.
Oh, Queen loves your hair. She says your hair is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I have two sisters and we all have red hair, different shades.
But all beautiful.
Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, so for this, we're going to be using our navy color from our Classic Blues pack. And whenever you're doing this project, I just want you to keep in mind, you want your background color and the color on top of it to be pretty different tones. So our cerulean is a lot lighter and our navy is a lot darker. And so that's gonna give us some perspective, and the eat is gonna pop off, because obviously that's our brain wants to go to the word and read the word. So we want it to look totally different from the background so that it's visually pleasing to our eyes. Okay, and so now we're gonna just pick up more paint and do the same thing we did before. So again, you can tape this down if you feel more comfortable, but I'm just gonna go straight for it. And you know, you get a lot of paint on your stencil, so just make sure you pick up that paint. Don't let it go to waste. Sorry, paste.
And again, a little does go a long way.
Yes, so you know, another tip too, put a little on your palette because you can always take more out, but you can't put more back in your tube. You can always like, you know, put some cling wrap on your palette, but it's just a lot easier to just apply a little at first and then apply more to your palette if you need it. Because you usually don't with all the paste that's on your tool and all the paste that's on your actual stencil. You just keep picking it up and working with it. You really do not need a lot of paste. And I always like to say, make your surface work for you. Don't work for your surface. So just flip it around, whatever is comfortable for you.
That's very smart.
We might need just a touch more paste on our palette. That might have been too much. I didn't take my own advice.
We have another question. How do you store the used stencils?
Use stencils. So you would just put them back on their adhesive backing and maybe put them in like a, you know, storage bag, like a file holder, whatever you have. But they do go really nicely back onto their adhesive, back onto their backing that you pulled them off of when you got them. Because that adhesive is still very adhesive, as you saw with the second half of our plaid stencil. Okay, now for the big reveal, you guys. Ta-da!
So cool.
See, look how detailed it is, you guys. Looks really nice. And like we said, you could do this with any kind of color palette you want, and see how I'm just sticking that back on my water basin as soon as I'm done. That is just the most important thing to remember. If you remember anything from this class, is to get your stencil in your water as soon as you are done. But with that, you guys, I think that we're done. So I hope you all learned something from this class today. I hope it inspired you to maybe pick up a mesh stencil pack in our new Sign Shop line, or you know, just get started with your own Sign Shop projects. So we always are going to give a huge thank you to Michaels for allowing us to do this class with you guys today and providing you all some inspiration. If you decide to do this project at home and you want to post it on social media, make sure to hashtag plaid crafts and make it with Michaels. Like Lindsay said, we're always following those 2 hashtags and looking at what you guys are making at home. And you guys are the ones that are inspiring us and deciding what we do next in a class. So without further ado, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We're so happy to have you here, and we'll see you next time. Bye.